I wanted to go over with you again a few of the steps required to get started on the project. The first thing to do as you get started is to identify very precisely the business unit that you want to study and its geographic and product boundaries. What do I mean by geographic and product boundaries? Let me give you an example. Suppose your client or your project were on a major diversified company. Think of, for example, General Electric, which has all these different business units, and each of the business units themselves may have different lines of business. About the right level of analysis for the project would be to look at General Electric in the white box industry, which is the business of making washers, dryers, refrigerators, and dishwashers. You'd also want to think about the geographic boundaries. This is a business that's accompanied by lots of competition from China, from different regions of the world. So you might want to think about it going global in this business definition, in which case you'd go narrow on the industry definition. So for example, a good business unit to study would be General Electric in white goods around the world. Here, contrast that with, let's say, a narrower geographic division, but a broader product boundary. Say, for example, you might look at Cemex in Mexico in the cement delivery business. Second step, after you've defined the business unit that you want to look at, is to define the industry. If you've done a comprehensive job on the business unit definition, it's relatively straightforward to identify the industry boundaries. You want to look for competitors that are in the same geographic and product space as the business unit that you've targeted. The third step is then to think about whether you want to use return on assets, return on sales, or return on equity as your major measure of financial performance in that industry. All else equal, you'd use ROA because you're interested in total return on invested capital. So return on assets is an appropriate measure of total return for most types of organizations. The exceptions arise when the organization that you're studying, the industry that you're studying, really doesn't have a normal asset base. It doesn't have a conventional asset base. If that's the case of the situation you're looking at, you might want to look at return on sales. Return on sales is useful for businesses that are in retail and transportation. It's also useful for professional service firms or resellers, that kind of thing. ROE is an alternative that's very appropriate for financial institutions where assets are financial assets, not operating assets. So in general, the default is ROA, but you would use ROS for retail, transportation, governmental institutions, and so on, and return on equity for financial institutions. The fourth step in the project is to estimate the industry average. I want to emphasize the importance of estimating accurately. Estimation can involve looking for a few representative competitors and coming up with an average. It can involve going to some sort of authoritative data set like LexisNexis, or looking in general out at Morningstar, Hoover's, that kind of thing. Whichever way you estimate this is fine. Just document your approach and keep in mind that you want to have a balanced method of estimation that will account for the wide variety of competitors in the industry as you've defined it. The fifth step is to compare the industry average profitability on whichever metric you've chosen, ROA, ROS, or ROE, with the global average that I provided you with in class to determine if the industry is attractive or unattractive. So let's say, for example, that you're looking at General Electric and white goods globally. You're using ROA as your measure of performance. And let's say you come up with an estimate for the industry as a whole. It counts for General Electric as well as its rivals, Westinghouse and others. And let's say you come up with an estimate of ROA for that industry that's about 10%. Well, that's well above the ROA that we discussed in class. So you would conclude that that's an attractive industry. If, on the other hand, your estimate for the industry average is either a tie with the global average from class or below that average, you would conclude that the industry is unattractive. The sixth and final step to get started is to conduct a five forces analysis to explain the conclusion that you've drawn about industry average profitability. So if you've concluded that the industry is attractive, then you want to drive a five forces analysis toward explaining why those five forces are low. On the other hand, if the industry is unattractive and underperforming the global average, then you want to run a five forces analysis with the objective of trying to figure out why those five forces, at least one of those five forces, is high and the profitability of the industry is low. So that's how to get started. Those are the first 6 steps.